Hey everybody, Chris here. Before we get going, I wanted to say a big thank you and a happy birthday to us. We're 2 years old today. When I decided to go ahead with this podcast 2 years ago, I had no idea what to expect. I didn't know if people would continue to listen past episode 1 or 2, or if I'd even continue to make it. But making it has become a lot of different things to me. It's fulfilled part of my creative urges. It's become an incredible source of my own continuing education. And maybe most important, it's become my connection to this tribe that we're building. It took 15 months to March of 2017 for us to reach 100,000 downloads. And 9 months later, today, with this episode, we're going to hit 300,000 downloads. 1 million this year? Could happen. Sounds crazy, but could happen. Thanks to all of you.
Maybe don't know.
This time.
What's up, everybody? I am your host, Chris Hampton.
And I'm Nate Drolet.
And together we form the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. I am purple.
Green Ranger.
You're the Green Ranger. All right. Since we've got that settled, we can just move on. We're about to head to Chattanooga here shortly for our kind of one-off special. Maybe it won't be a one-off. Maybe we'll do it again. Special workshop at Crux Conditioning, our guy Paul Corsaro's gym. Applied body tension and kettlebells. Paul's going to wreck some people with the kettlebells, which I'm pretty excited about. Yeah, in good ways. Yeah. Good wrecking. But, you know, it's that time of year. It's, is it already mid-December? It is. It's like, it's already in double digits in December.
It's the 8th.
Is it? Oh, yeah, tomorrow's the 9th. I was thinking we were just past the 9th. Okay, so we're not there yet. We got time. We got time, folks. But it's that time of year where people start thinking about their goals for next year. There's this whole bullshit New Year's resolution thing that people do that I try not to participate in. And if you love it, it's not bullshit. Well, yeah, it is. But you can love it. That's okay. I'm all right with that. Do you make resolutions?
Not really, no.
Okay, good. Then it's bullshit.
Yes. I am the authority here.
But there is some value, I believe, in setting goals. And that's what we're going to talk about today. I think it's a complicated process, and there's, you know, if you start looking at the science, just like in any other aspect of existence, then it gets even more complicated. And so let's talk about it. First off, should we even set goals?
Yes.
That was so nice and so calm. You made me believe it.
Yeah, you know, if you don't have goals, like it depends. Like, if you don't want to get better, if you don't want to improve, and you really don't want to like go anywhere with things, then yeah, you don't need goals. Like, for instance, I don't need to set goals on my pizza consumption for the year because I know I'm already killing it and it's going to happen. I don't need to improve that.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't beat perfection.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
So I'd say there are a lot of things that maybe you don't need to set goals for.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, if you want to improve, I think goals are a useful tool.
Yeah, and why can't we just improve in a linear fashion? I mean, why not just because we like it, we're going to improve at it?
Because it doesn't work, unfortunately. That'd be nice. Yeah,
it would be. But, I mean, humans are wired for routine. You know, it's just what we do. Whether we set that routine ourselves and we do it on purpose or not, we're still creatures of habit, creatures of routine. You know, it's just what we do. And if you think about your own life, you'll see that there are a lot of routines that you go through that may not be things that you intend to be a routine, but they are. You know, I think we all do that. And even if that routine is constant variability, I mean, if you need to be in a different place every month and you just travel around constantly, that's your routine.
Yeah.
You know, it may not seem like a routine because it's different all the time, but your routine is it has to be different all the time. Mm-hmm. And I think if we want to improve, we have to change up routines, set a new routine, you know, and most of us want to improve. I mean, most climbers do. If you're listening to this podcast, you damn sure better want to improve or turn this shit off. Yeah. Hopefully it makes you improve and you hate it because of that. That would be my goal, actually. Make people leave because they're improving and they don't want to. You know, what are your thoughts on, is setting a goal something that helps you improve, and how? I mean,
it depends. So
you got a lot of it depends today. And apparently I've had too much coffee because I'm fucking wired.
So I mostly say this. We come from opposite sides of the spectrum on this. Okay. I have a record of horrible goal setting, and I'm fully open about this. Like, I am weary of goals, or I have been weary of goals, and it's been my approach. There are times where I've crushed it with like the goals and the systems that I put in place, and it really worked out well. And there's times where I just failed miserably. And so there are times where I think setting goals can be detrimental. Easy example, and something that I used to have the issue of, is I would set a goal and I'd almost become like complacent with it.
Right.
And this is something I was very, very guilty of, is I'd set a goal and I'd be like, okay, I need to get more information on how to get to this goal. And so I'd be like, okay, time to start reading books, time to start learning. And by doing those things, I felt like I was achieving. I was just like, oh, like I'm reading all these books, like I'm getting closer to my goal. And I was getting all this gratification of feeling like I was doing well, but really like learning wasn't getting me any closer.
Yeah.
It was getting me
lost in the learning loop.
Exactly. Like I was getting the tools to be able to maybe speed up the process, but without starting the process, I wasn't doing anything.
Right.
Like I was still sitting at square zero, you know?
Yeah, you had a shed full of tools and never started the project.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you know, there's quite a bit of research around that I've been looking into a little bit. And apparently the brain can't distinguish between what we want and what we have. So neurologically, when we fail to reach a goal, it feels like a loss, you know. And you can, you know, if you've ever seen a kid in the grocery store or, you know, in a toy store or whatever, freaking out because they aren't getting what they want, it's because in their heads, they're like, this is already mine, you know? And then when mom puts the cereal back on the shelf, they're like, fuck you, mom, that's my cereal, you know, and they're pissed off. And that happens because we get these, you know, these dopamine hits, because, you know, dopamine is associated with pleasure. It's also associated with motivation. By learning, by reading books, by listening to podcasts and all that, you're getting these little dopamine hits. Some research says that those dopamine hits are enough to keep you from actually achieving your goal because your brain thinks you've already done it.
You've already got like that emotional reward.
Right.
Totally. Yeah, I could see that for sure.
Yeah. And then there's other research that says different, but I mean, I think that's true for some people. Mm-hmm. For me, it's the opposite. If I set a goal, I feel that loss if I don't achieve it, especially if I make it public, you know, say something about it or just write it down for my own sake and put it where I can see it. then I feel that loss if I don't achieve the goal. So I'm working my ass off toward it. Maybe sometimes even reaching toward the goal too soon, not doing enough learning, not doing enough preparation. I'm trying to jump right to the goal. Mm-hmm. So I think it can be good and dangerous. And I think that's sort of what we're going to try to get into here, is how to set appropriate goals, how to achieve the goals. And we're not brain scientists by any mean, but
we probably wouldn't refer to ourselves as brain scientists if we were.
There's a science of the brain. Come on now. But we do have experience with this, and I know all you science people out there are going to hate me for saying this, but I put anecdotal evidence on just as high a tier as scientific evidence. I just do. Sue me. Deal with it. So let's talk about setting appropriate goals. Mm-hmm. You have trouble reaching your goals.
Yes.
Have you taken steps to rectify that, or do you just like not reaching your goals?
Setting goals is way more fun than actually doing the work to get there. I like just putting something on a whiteboard and staring at it.
Do you have a bunch of whiteboards, one for each goal, so you can just keep them there all the time?
Yes. They're like seasonal.
Cool.
Yeah, they just go up. It's like, okay, here's fall. I don't even have to change them either. They don't. I write them in Sharpie. They just stay the same. Man, I'd say. So we're talking about
how to set appropriate goals.
For me, one of the biggest things I've learned, and this is where I feel like I went wrong a lot of times, was being emotionally detached from whatever is going on while setting goals. And so this is why I don't like setting goals in the winter, because I'm normally rock climbing a lot in the winter.
Right.
Like I'm in the thick of it. I've got everything going on and I'm like really psyched, maybe like too psyched even, like to the point to where it's like, oh yeah, I'll do all of this and this and this. And in the past, I've always taken a month off every year, typically in the summer. And for me, that like the years when that's when I made my goal was like during that time. I would wait until maybe 3 weeks into that month. And at that point, I'm no longer like in the thick of training. I've had some time to like kind of mull things over, but I'm like excited to get back at it. Like that 3 week off kind of period, I'm suddenly like a lot more unbiased about my goals and like, okay, what can I really do this year? Like, sure. I'm not being unrealistic. And for me, I'm like more emotionally detached, and that's a great time for me to set a goal.
So you need a 4th of July resolution.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Eat less hot dogs. But so for me, that works really, like that has worked better than other things. Or just even like trying to look at myself as another person, because it's easy to give advice. It's really hard to take it.
Yeah, totally.
It's hard to like give ourselves good advice, but you can give other people advice all the time because you're just like, okay, well, what are the fundamentals? What are the basics? Like you look at the obvious. You don't look at someone else and be like, well, you're a special snowflake, so these are all the things you're going to need to do. Instead, you're like, well, it's really obvious. Just do this. Yep. So if you can look at yourself in that same way, which is really hard to do, like then that's going to be a good way to like kind of pick out what you need to be doing.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a bad idea to also ask your friends when you're trying to come up with your goals, what do you think I'm capable of? And they may go overboard. You said you think I'm capable of climbing V12. I'm like, you're stupid. No, but I do think that your friends have, as long as they're honest friends, not the friends who are just like giving you participation trophies all the time. If they're honest with you, they're good people to ask, and I don't know what V12 feels like. You've seen me climb way more than I've seen me climb. So, you saying you're capable of climbing V12 holds a lot of weight for me. So that in turn helps me make a goal. My goal may not be V12 at this point, but it might be down the road, and V12 is a number I hadn't really put much thought into. Like my goal setting for bouldering's pretty much stopped at V10. And I was like, all right, I'm here. Cool. Done. Sell my pads. So I think that's important to do. And I think it can be really valuable. For me, the number one thing I have to do when I set a goal is ask myself, am I willing to, and do I have the realistic time to put into reaching that goal? If, when my goal was 514, I knew it was going to take me some time. I knew I had a busy life already, but I was willing to put that work in. So rather than just saying 514 is my goal became put the work in to climb 514. And then if that achievement happens as a result of the process, great. But I really love the process. I love digging into all that shit. So for me, the process sort of becomes the goal.
Totally.
And the achievement is a byproduct. So I think that's important. Be honest with yourself. Be realistic about the commitment you can make. And look at the process it's going to take to get to that goal. And be honest with yourself. Do you want to train that hard? Do you have the time to train that hard? Do you have the resources to put behind whatever it is to reach your goal?
Yeah. James Clear had something that I had a phrase that I liked a lot, and that's that the goal is the direction and the process is what takes you there.
Yeah, totally.
And so maybe your goal was 514. So that's the direction you want to go. But if you don't have a process, then you're going nowhere fast.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And it can, if you're not realistic and you don't have that process, then those dopamine hits that you get from setting this goal and feeling good about I've set this goal, when your brain decides I already own this thing and you don't get it, that can mega backfire. If you have no process, no lead up to that goal, you don't achieve that goal, then you've just lost something big. It can cause all sorts of anxiety, depression, whatever. That might sound silly to some people, but it's totally true. We've all seen and experienced it. I've experienced it myself where you might win something, someone might be giving you taxes, for instance. If you're doing your taxes, you think you're getting back $3,000 and then you realize there was some mistake and you're only getting back $300. All of a sudden you feel like you just lost $2,700 and you're super bummed about it. Mm-hmm. Like, oh God, now I'm not going to be able to afford to pay my bills. But that money wasn't there to begin with. So I think it's really important to have a clear path instead of just expecting the outcome.
Totally.
How can you ensure that you have a clear path to your goal?
Hiring a coach.
Wow, that's a good one.
I think there's a few things that are worth keeping in mind. One is, and so first off, just when you're making goals, like looking at the goals that you've made in the past and like what has worked and what hasn't.
Yeah.
And like kind of just dissect from there.
Yep. Process journal.
Process journal. Not so subliminal messaging. But the big thing is so we're just a giant compilation of habits. Was it David Coyle who wrote The Power of Habit? Probably.
Daniel Coyle wrote one of the two. I'm totally lost here. Sports Gene or Talent Code.
Talent Code, that's right. Epstein was...
Yeah. Epstein was the other.
I couldn't tell you. So The Power of Habit, I've read it.
I'm going to look it up while you talk.
Okay. I can't think of the author right now, but he in it says that I think it's something like 60% of our day is just habits. Mm-hmm. I mean, which makes sense. Like really few things that you do are like choices.
Yep.
Like most of what we do are just automated habits. And so changing habits, like that's step one on becoming better at things.
Charles Duhigg.
Oh yeah, doing. Not even close. But so I think for a lot of people, when they want to make these like system or process goals, they're like, okay, I need to do like, I'm going to run 3 miles every morning. I'm going to drink a gallon of water every day, all these things. And really like step one, as far as I'm concerned, is like, okay, what have you been doing? Like, how can we be a little bit better? Like, let's say you take 4 months off a year. Like, let's say you're an accountant and when tax season rolls around, suddenly hangboarding turns into like donuts and 15-hour work days.
Which, that's nice.
I mean, half of that sounds great. Like, so you don't need some big extensive plan to like get you through this, or God forbid you try and say, I'm going to make it up in the other like 8 or 9 months of the year. Instead, it's like, well, if you've been doing nothing for those like few months every year, can you just do a little bit of something? Like, can you just hangboard twice a week? Can you just go to the gym like for 45 minutes, like 2-3 times a week? Like, and that doesn't sound like much. And you might even be like, well, how's that going to get me stronger? But it's like, well, here's what you've been doing. Can we just improve on it?
Yeah. And know yourself. I mean, some people can make big, elaborate, long-term plans and, you know, make those work. I just had a consultation with a woman yesterday, shout out Annie, who had a 19-week plan written out and prefaced it with, you know, lest you should bring up the Dan John idea of you can't stick to a 19-week plan. I can. I've done it before, and much more boring plans. So, you know, if you know yourself that well, then great. By all means, do it. You know, but if you have trouble sticking to a 4-week plan, then do exactly what you're talking about. You know, change some small thing.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't have to be too much. Like, one thing, like this is goal versus process kind of thing. I had a goal one year of I wanted to start drinking more water. And this is just a habit I wanted to build. And so I tried a couple different things. Like I was like, okay, like I have a gallon, I fill up every morning, and every time I pour water, I want to come out of there. All these different things, and nothing really worked. And finally, like the only change I made was I always keep a Nalgene or a water bottle on me, and when I'm sitting down, I have the lid off. Like, which it's funny that's the only difference is like by keeping the lid off, I look over, I'm like, oh, I'll take a sip out of that. But if the lid's on, I drink almost no water.
Yep.
But it's just a matter of like, I'll be typing on my computer, look over, I'm like, oh, I'll grab some water. Before I know it, like I easily drink like 3 liters of water a day, which is like for me kind of what I was shooting for.
Yep. I have an interesting hack in that same goal of drinking more water. Mine was that, you know, I've got so many Nalgene bottles, they just collect and then they just sit around, and then I would leave the house without them. Mm-hmm. But as soon as I put power company stickers on my water bottle, because I want to be a walking billboard for my own company, then I take one every time I leave the house. You know, if I go to the gym, if I'm going wherever I'm going, I have a Nalgene with me with a power company sticker on it. You know, and I keep it right next to me while I'm coaching, while I'm at the gym, while I'm
it's right here,
doing
right
whatever.
now.
It's sitting right here next to me now. So that was my hack. Like, I'm going to be a walking billboard. I'm going to have my logo around all the damn time. Why not have it on a water bottle that is just going to make me healthier?
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I mean, that's just it. It's not like you sat down and wrote out a 12-point plan on how to drink more water and when to consume it at every hour of every day. Instead, you're like, I'm going to put a sticker on the water bottle.
Yep.
And it worked. Like, and for me, it was just, I'm going to have water near me, which, you know, this sounds super silly and how simple it is, but for me, that made a huge difference. And now, like, I'm more hydrated.
Yeah. But if you don't have the water near you, and there are all sorts of options of what to grab when you go to the refrigerator or, you know, walk up to the counter at the climbing gym or whatever, then you're far less likely to buy the water, you know, especially if the water's $2.50 and the Hawaiian Punch is 99 cents. You're probably going to buy the Hawaiian Punch.
Lime green Hawaiian Punch every day.
So I think that's good. Make small little changes.
Yeah. And it's the idea, like, make it so easy you cannot fail, which, no matter how many times, this is an idea I stole from Tim Ferriss, and no matter how many times he says it or I say it or anyone says it, it's really hard to implement. And I wrote a blog post on hangboarding with this system of too easy to fail.
Yep.
Because like I couldn't stick with any hangboard protocol. This was many years ago. And I was like, okay, like what can I literally not skip? Like what is so easy that I would feel like an idiot if I didn't do this? And I was like, I'm just going to do 2 hangs a day. Like I was doing 0 and suddenly I was doing 2 hangs a day, like, I don't know, 4 days a week. So it's like, well, that's 8 more hangs a week. And so that's what, like 400 more hangs a year than what I had done prior. Like, on like it'd be easy to say, oh, like, but what would that do? But it's like, man, over a year.
Does a lot more than doing nothing.
400 hangs of trying really hard. Like, yeah, that's way more than doing nothing.
Yeah, totally.
And for me, that worked out well. And it was kind of like this little gateway program of now I'm like, I can easily like step up, do more hangs and like maybe a few sets of repeaters or something like that. Like I now know that it's really not much work to just pause, go do some hangs and then continue with climbing or like whatever the process is. Yep. But for me, it wasn't like, okay, I'm going to put my head down. I'm going to try this heinous program of like 18 straight weeks of hangboarding. I was just like, oh, I'm just going to do 2 hangs a day.
Yep. And I think there's a lot of value as well in setting, these big, as Jim Collins calls them, big, hairy, audacious goals. Just these far out goals that are going to be really difficult to reach. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of value in that as well. It doesn't always just have to be a tiny little goal. But the important thing about these huge goals is that you have a clear path to it that has a lot of these, that includes a lot of these smaller, too easy to fail goals. Mm-hmm. I think that's really important to make sure that you're working in. And I also think it's important for that big goal to be specific.
Yes.
If it's something just like, I want to get better at climbing, what the hell does that mean? If the goal is, I want to climb 514, that's a little more specific. But if you can narrow that down even further, I want to climb whatever the 514 is or whatever the V5 is, whatever the big goal is, then that makes it even easier to plot a clear path leading to that goal, and a clear path of these smaller little checkpoints, so to speak, and include some too easy to fail goals in there. And this doesn't have to happen by next year or next 4th of July in your case. This can happen over 10 years. You can set a giant goal like that if you can make that happen, if you can plan that far ahead, if it's in your personality to stay the course for that long. Mm-hmm. Then I think you can do that. Anything else you want to say about setting goals?
Yeah. What do you think are bad goals? Like, what are some examples of things that when you hear it, you're like, oh, that's doomed to fail? Or that you've heard people say in the past or yourself where it was just like, oh, that was, maybe that was too vague or too specific or, just wrong goal, wrong time kind of thing.
I like where you started with the emotion. If you just sent your hardest route, say you just sent your first 12A, you're super stoked. Making a goal at that moment can be a little dangerous.
I'm climbing 13A next month.
Right. Yeah. I'm not saying you shouldn't make a goal right at that moment, but you still have to take a step back, be realistic, look at it objectively. And I think that's tough to do. I also think goals that are set because you want to keep up with someone else or you want to, you're feeding your ego with your goal, I think is a really bad way to set goals.
What would be an example of that, of feeding your ego with a goal?
Say you're you're doing a good job of getting into the gym, of trying hard, you're making progress, but you have a climbing partner or a friend whose progress is faster. And that could be for any number of reasons. It doesn't mean that you're doing something wrong. They're just progressing faster. And you've both got to 12A around the same time, and then she got to 12D much faster than you. And her goal is now 13A. You're still at 12B. I think then saying, oh, we got to 12A at the same time, so I want to get to 13A at the same time. I think that's a bad goal. Mm-hmm. That's your ego getting involved, and you need to look at it in perspective. Her goal is 1 letter grade. Maybe your goal should be 1 letter grade. And if you're progressing even slower, be honest about that. I want to climb 5 12Bs, or whatever, or 12As, or whatever level you're at, instead of I want to reach the next letter. So I think that can be tough. It's tough to take the ego out of the equation, but I do think that's an easy place to go wrong. What about you?
There's a couple ones you've already hit on. As far as being vague, like, I want to have better technique next year.
Right.
Well, what does that mean? Like, I just want to be stronger next year.
It means buy the Applied Body Tension ebook and go through it.
Exactly. I mean, objective. And unbiased, too. Definitely.
Totally unbiased.
So another one is, like, trying to avoid things. Like, saying, like, oh, my goal is to just not get injured.
Okay.
It's like, yes, maybe that can be a good goal, but you need process. You need steps. Like, maybe that's, I'm going to try and get an extra hour, or I'm going to get an extra hour of sleep every night. I'm going to stay hydrated. Like, when a hold starts to hurt when I'm climbing on it, I'm just going to stop because it doesn't matter. And there's a billion other rock climbs to do in this world other than this one that's hurting me.
Right. So find the actionable thing.
Yes.
In trying to avoid something.
Yes. So with that, it's just goals that aren't backed by action, I guess. And then agree with you as far as, like, I just want to climb this grade. Like, okay, don't just say you want to climb V10. Say, I want to climb this boulder in Bishop. It is good for these months of the year. Like, these are the things I need to achieve to get there. Like, and then build the process. Ty Landman at one point talked about, he was just like, you shouldn't be, like, doing a boulder shouldn't just be the end of it. It shouldn't be like, oh, I want to do this boulder because then I'll have just that done. Instead, it's like, you should be doing climbs because of what they represent. Like, I'm going to do all these climbs because they get me better at climbing steep crimps. And so once you've done all these climbs, it's like you now have a new skill set. It's not just like, I'm just going to project this one thing to death, and when I'm done, I've gained nothing other than I projected it and got it done.
Sure. I think that's a great, long-term growth way to look at goal setting. I do, however, think that if your goals are purely, I want to someday climb Fuzzy Undercling, and that's my goal. Like, if I climb Fuzzy Undercling, I can hang up my quick draws and I could be done rock climbing. That's fine too. That's totally up to you. So if that's your big goal and you don't care what that represents, other than I just did Fuzzy Undercling and I can check that box, then great, go for it. However, I like your approach if it's a long-term growth sort of an approach. You want to keep growing. I want to keep growing. Yeah. Hopefully most of you want to keep growing. So find goals that represent things to you.
Mm-hmm. And then last thing is, don't set goals that you're not going to do. Like, and this sounds silly, but like, don't be like, you know what? I'm going to climb 512 trad this year. Like, you know what? I can say this right now. I'm going to climb some 513 trad in 2018. Mm-hmm. Me and you both know I've got some cams. They're not moving. Like, maybe 2020. I don't know. Maybe when I'm like 50. Like,
Yep.
But yeah, it's like, don't make goals that'll be a pain for you to even try and attempt.
Right.
Like, if you're a boulder, don't say, hey, I'm going to go start sport climbing this year. Like, maybe say, hey, or like, don't make a big audacious goal for sport climbing this year. if you know chances are it's not going to happen. Like maybe say, you know what, I'm going to try and get out just a handful of days this year. Like I'm just going to get more comfortable, start building it up. But yeah, don't spread yourself thin on goals. I think that's a big thing people do is they're like, I want to do this and this and this and this. And suddenly it's this idea of goal competition. Like if you have so many things that you're trying to steer yourself towards, you just spin circles and don't get anything done.
Yeah, totally.
So yeah, like prune away the goals that just don't make sense or don't push you forward, or that just, maybe you do want to sport climb or trad climb, but find a time when that's going to be advantageous and you're actually going to get it done.
Yep. No, I couldn't agree more. I think that comes right back to being honest and realistic about the time and the commitment involved. And, I've done it in the past. I've made goals that I didn't keep up with because I didn't put enough thought into how much time and commitment it was going to take, and do I actually have that amount of time and commitment available? So yeah, I think that's a good one. You want to take a break before we talk about how we reach the goals, before we release all of our secrets?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, break. Hey everybody, Chris here. I'll try to keep this short and sweet. Since this thing became officially official, I've basically been obsessed. I've got dozens of episodes waiting to go out, and I'm constantly recording new conversations. I want to continue putting this level of energy into it, and you all can help. We've created a page at patreon.com/powercompanypodcast where you can help support what we're building. In return, even for as little as $1 per month, you'll get access to the brand new We Scream Like Eagles podcast, which includes tips from our guests, extra conversations about hot topics, and Q&As with your questions posed to our guests. If you think it's worth more than $1 a month, we've got other rewards available on top of the bonus episodes like stickers, ebooks, t-shirts, and training plans. So if you've been considering pitching in, now's the time. That's patreon.com/powercompanypodcast. Thanks a ton, and back to the show. Okay, we are back. Green and purple Power Rangers unite. I don't know if that's what they say, but sounds cool. They should totally say that.
I'm sure they're going to be writing that one in.
Green and purple make a kind of a strange shade of brown, though, so I don't know if I like this color combo.
Yeah, but it's also the Hulk and the Joker.
Oh, shit, it's the Hulk itself.
Yeah.
There's purple ripped up pants, and he's green.
Boom.
So we are the Hulk. I like this. Incredible. Okay, how to reach your goals. I think it feels really good to set goals. We get those dopamine hits, like, here I go, I'm on my path. But how do you get there? It's tough for a lot of people, as we see with New Year's resolutions that end January 3rd.
Yes.
It's tough. So we talked a little bit about, I think setting appropriate goals gets you on your way. And I said that you should have a clear path. And I think that clear path has to involve sub-goals. And I think these are a really important way to reach your big goal. Have sub-goals that are in some linear fashion. I like the analogy of a boxing trainer. Boxing trainers set up their fighter with fights that are going to set them up well for the big fight, the title fight. If the title fight is a southpaw, they're not going to have them fight only right-handed boxers leading up to the championship fight. Not going to happen. If your big goal is the bleeding, you're not going to go to the red and climb in the madness cave all year and then expect to go do the bleeding, which is vert, techie, crimpy nastiness, or you're going to fail. So you have to set sub goals that are linear and lead you directly to your big goal. I think that's super important.
Have you ever had any times where you feel like you did that particularly well? Like, were there any things what were the things that you think you did well when you have done that?
I think that just talking about recent goals, recent climbing goals. Let's go there, since this is a climbing podcast. The best climbing podcast, might I add. When my goal was V10, and I knew that the V10s I would have near me were going to be steep. They were going to be pretty good holds, but they were going to involve big reaches. I knew that was the case. I knew those were the V10s I was going to be near and would try. So that's what I did in the gym. I knew I wouldn't get out to other boulders, so I couldn't say I want to do V8s in this style and then V9s in this style. So in the gym, I made my whole limit bouldering session for months be good crimps, but at a really steep angle, so that I had to try really hard and big reaches, and I spent time on super steep stuff. I would spend a lot more time on the 60-degree wall at the gym than I normally would, so that I get used to those angles. And I had checkpoint moves. Like, these are my limit bouldering moves. This is somewhat similar to the move on my whatever my projects are. And I just worked on those moves. I didn't set simulators, but just similar to the movement. And I think that worked really well. I ended up doing my first 3 V10s that season, with only getting out bouldering a handful of times. So yeah, I think I did a great job in that respect. And I think there are times when I've done really poor jobs as well. Going to Waco this last season, I spent the entire lead up to Waco working on Golden Harvest. And
the most anti-Waco boulder.
And lo and behold, there wasn't a single thing in Waco, anything similar to Golden Harvest. So I just wasn't prepared. So it took me several weeks in Waco to really wrap my head around the style there and to climb anything difficult.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think those are 2 examples of doing it and not doing it well.
Word. So on how to reach your goals, are there any major pitfalls that you see people make so they've got their goals all lined up? Maybe they have they're like, I have my goal, I have my process, and then the wheels fall off at some point.
Yeah, and I think I've done this as well, and I see it a lot. And I think as coaches, this is something that we deal with quite a bit, and that's trying to jump to the final goal too soon. They have the process in place, but skipping over parts of that process is super common, especially as you get closer and closer to the goal. Or climbers especially can trick themselves with conditions. Like, if it's summer and it's 90 degrees and you have this goal of climbing your hardest route and it's 3 letter grades harder than you've ever climbed, as soon as it hits 75, you're like, conditions are amazing, I'm headed to the proj. But it's still way too soon. Climbers trick themselves. They start getting on the project way too soon. I've done that a lot of times. And I think it's a valuable lesson to learn. So, if you're going to do it, but be honest about how it went. Know that you screwed up and be able to make changes the next time. But I think that's the most common thing that comes to mind. Okay. What do you think?
For me, it's more along the process, and it's that people don't plan for disaster.
Okay.
And, disaster could be anything. It doesn't have to be something like catastrophic, like you got in a car accident and broke your leg, but
your plane crashed into your project. It's no longer.
Yeah. You could be Mikey Williams, punt off the top of Proper Soul, and then the entire cliff gets closed for peregrine falcons. Oh, man. Yeah. So it doesn't have to be something like that, but something that I've grown to appreciate more and more as a coach and working with a ton of people is that, man, there's no person that has just like a nice steady 9 to 5. They get off work, they've got all the hours afterwards that are relaxed. They can train, free weekends to go rock climbing outside.
Yeah.
Like, and that's just their year-round schedule. Like, you know, friends are getting married, they have to travel, like you get sick, like you have work obligations, you have life obligations. Like no one has a normal schedule. Like everyone has something hectic happening.
Right.
And if you don't plan for that, then it's easy to just fall apart and be like, you know what? I'm just going to hit the reset button. I'm going to put this off. I'll wait until things calm down and I'll start back up. And honestly, some of the best advice I was ever given in life was there's no such thing as perfect conditions. And if you wait for perfect conditions, you'll never get anything done.
Totally. Yeah. I had a friend who saved the on-site for years and 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 just never got around to actually ever doing the route, ever trying it. That happened with a lot of routes. So, I can appreciate waiting for good conditions, but you'll always find some reason why it's not perfect.
Yeah. I mean, if you're looking for it. I mean, not to say that these are like fake excuses. Like, man, just sometimes bad things happen, like in a string. So what this is more saying is like, have a backup plan. Like if suddenly you have to work late or like, you're just like, hey, I'm going to be swamped for the next 3 weeks, whether it's work, life, whatever, already have that plan made of like, okay, this is a workout I can do door to door when I go to the gym in 1 hour. Like if I can just do that 2, maybe 3 days a week, get in, warm up, try hard and leave, like I'm going to at least try and maintain. Like have that plan so that when shit does hit the fan, which I mean, it's life, shit's going to hit the fan at some point. Like you're prepared.
Yeah. And also along those same lines, I would say, be flexible to some degree with your goals. If you set a time limit on your goal, for instance, my goal was 5:14 by 40 and I missed it by 2 weeks or something.
Failure,
total failure if I wanted to look at it that way. But I like to think that I'm pretty good at setting goals, trying to achieve those goals. And then if I don't get that cherry on top, I'm fine with it because I'm still in the process. And in reality, the process is my goal. I do want to become a better climber. My big overarching goal is this super vague, I want to become a better climber. So when I set a goal for 5:14, the reality is that I want to put in the work to climb 5:14. I want to reach these little sub goals leading to 5:14. So when I didn't get to 5:14 by 40, it didn't hurt my feelings. It didn't break me. I was just like, okay, cool. I've done a lot of work. I've passed some really important milestones, and I'm gonna go try 5:14 again next week. Even though I'm already 40.
Yeah.
So I think you have to be a little bit easy on yourself, a little bit flexible. You don't have to be a goal Nazi. And if shit hits the fan, you're allowed to regroup and push the goal back. And if the process is your goal, then that's pretty easy to do.
Yeah, totally. And that's just it. Like, so as far as process goes, there's this idea I really like. So imagine you rock climb 4 days a week, or like you're in the gym. So Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, something like that. Common for a lot of people. Maybe it's 3, maybe it's 5, depending on the person.
What if it's 0.3
days per week?
Yeah, because that's about what I rock climb right now.
Yeah, that's not going to work out for my math. So we're saying 4 because it's an easy number to multiply by. So if you do 4 times a week, that's roughly 200 sessions a year.
Okay.
And let's say you improve half a grade a year, which is actually pretty awesome in the long run.
It is for sure.
I know when I first started, I was like, no, I'm going from V6 to V10 in a year. Like anything else was bullshit. But now I think about it, I'm like, oh, if I improved like half a grade a year, I'd be like a consistent V16 climber by the time I'm 36.
Yep.
I'd be all right.
Linear progression is great.
Yeah, exactly. Like, And it's funny, like, I've talked with people about this, like some people are like, half a grade, that sounds ridiculous. And, I've got buddies who've all been climbing over 10 years and they're like, half a grade. That's achievable. That'd be nice.
Yeah.
So if let's say you're achieving half a grade a year, which is just the difference between like, oh, you broke into V8 and the next year you're a solid V8 climber. Next year you broke into V9. That would mean that every session you're improving 1/400th of a grade.
Oh, that's a cool way to look at it.
So here's the thing. If you're improving half a grade,
Reddit just went crazy. They're trying to figure out what 1/400th of a grade means right now.
I'm sure there's a rep and set scheme to get you there, and they'll find it. But so here's the thing. If you're improving 1/400th of a grade, how can you make that number bigger? Like, what kind of practice can you put in? Like, yeah, maybe you just do a few hangs a day. Like, will that make it, if you can go from 1/400th to 1/300th or 1/200th, like, which still sounds like small numbers, like if you can just be a little more deliberate, a little more intentional with your practice, or like, I mean, shit, if you know you're bad at big moves, like, what if you just spend an extra like 10 minutes of every session climbing big moves? Like, will that bump it up from 1/400th?
Yep.
And some people don't improve a half grade a year. Like, they improve a half grade every 2 years. So you're at 1/800th.
Right.
So it's like, can you do better than 1/800th a session? So it's that idea. Like, whenever I look at, okay, what kind of process am I instilling? Like, can I do better than that? Or even like, man, like I said, a half grade would be sick. Can I hit a 1/400th? Like, what can I do to try and make that number as big as possible?
Cool. I like that. The math hurts my brain, but I like where you're going with it.
I try to avoid math on this podcast because we're not the best with it.
Oh God, birds are going crazy on the window. Okay. Yasmin, the birds are trying to get in right now. So if they're here when you guys get back from China, it's not our fault. Anything else on how to reach your goals?
Yeah. So I'd say, and this is like, for me personally, one thing that I think I've both done well and I've really failed at the same time is this idea of delayed gratification. And this is something that I feel like you did really well when you were like, okay, I want to climb 514. So every time a season started, you're like, I'm going to pick a couple routes that are like, maybe like 13 minus that are really outside of my wheelhouse. And they're going to both build momentum and they're going to make me a more well-rounded climber.
Yep.
And so I had one season where I went on a trip for 6 weeks and I went to a bunch of different boulder fields. And my goal, like, I'd say my long-term goal was to climb a new highest grade. But I wasn't going to try that until I was in Waco, which was going to be several months later. It was going to be, in like February. And this was in October. So I was like, okay, cool. Like, what I'm going to do, I'm going to try and climb as many 8s and 9s, like crimpy and powerful as I can, because those were styles I really struggled with at the time.
Yep.
And I'm just going to do everything I can. So I went to Yosemite. I climbed literally everything I could. Like, it didn't matter if it was like V3 or whatever. Like, if it felt like a hard style, my whole purpose of this trip was just to climb as many new boulders that were hard for me. And so I kind of like, it was great because I was like, oh, I don't have to worry about if I'm sending like quote unquote hard things. It's like, as long as it's hard for me, that's all I'm going to do. And I ended up having a good bit of success. Like, in Yosemite, I was there for 2 weeks and climbed like a bunch of different boulders. And like, I had little minor goals for each trip. So in Yosemite, one of my primary goal in the end was to flash Midnight Lightning. So I spent 2 weeks climbing everything, like blue suede shoes, backer cracker, to like more powerful climbs, like anything that was a classic or that I found challenging, I wanted to do it so that I could like know this style. And then on my second to last day, I went and I flashed Midnight Lightning. And it was like, I wouldn't define.
And then the heavens opened and the angels sang, and it was amazing.
It was amazing. And really, it was just a V8 flash. But
I already blew my flash on Midnight Lightning years ago when I was a traddy, because I just had to
scuff up those footholds.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, had I just been like, oh, I just want to do this one boulder, like, I may not have learned much. But like, every single place I went, I had like one end goal, and I had the other goal was just like, I want to do everything that's hard. So I went to like Pre-Straw, Yosemite, Joe's Valley, and all these different things. And there were a couple like highlight successes, but really, like, at the end of it, I just was a much more well-rounded climber
Yep.
because I took that approach. And then this was kind of like looking back at, sometimes things get in the way. I ended up getting sick for a little over a month right before going to Waco, and didn't hit my goal. And that sucked. I ended up having a good season there. I climbed quite a few V11s in single sessions, which for me was really awesome. That was a huge new breakthrough. But I was just it took me a while to see that season as a success, because it really was I showed delayed gratification and I really built up well and I learned a lot, even though that one final cherry on top never came.
Right.
It didn't matter because I had grown so much. And so that was a time when things went well, but I've also had times where I went straight for the cherry on top.
Yep.
I was okay, full force focus on, I want to climb this rock climb, and I didn't build my pyramid for the season, or I wasn't working on my weaknesses. And it was a very short-sighted approach. And that's something that I've been guilty of more often than I've, displayed delayed gratification.
Yep. There's some research, and I'm curious what you think about this, in regards to that season. There's some research saying that sub goals can tank your bigger goal because you get that dopamine hit. You feel successful and you have no reason to continue on to that big goal. When you went to Waco, did you continue in a fashion similar to your sub goals? And I use the word research very lightly here, Will Anglin, because I don't dig into it, as all of you know, and I read it on the internet, so it must be true. But there's definitely some sort of study that's been done that shows empirical evidence that your sub goals can tank your bigger goal. So, what do you think?
I think you can definitely allow it to get yourself to get lost in sub goals. Easy example are people who try to build their pyramid a little too wide. I'd say that's not super common.
I need 128 12As, 64 12Bs, 32 12Cs. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, I think building.
You see that math I just did? Holy shit. Okay, sorry.
Gold stars. I think pyramids are invaluable. Every season, and it doesn't even have to be this perfect pyramid of grades. It's I'm just bad at this style. I'm going to do as many of those. Just the idea of doing a bulk of things that you're poor at, and that'll make you better. But that said, at the same time, it's I don't think there's any value. If someone's a V8 climber, they're getting nothing out of going out and climbing 100 V0s and V1s.
Right.
Other than jug rash.
Yep.
That's all they're getting out of it. It's too easy
for them. Fun.
And it could be fun, totally. I mean, there are times 24 hours of horseshoe hell where you do a lot of jug rashing.
I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, but
don't expect
it may not be pushing you toward your goal.
Yeah, it's so easy that you can pretty much just climb it completely mindlessly, and it's not really going to make you better. So as far as that specific situation, no, I don't think those in any way deterred me from my main goal.
Okay.
I went out, climbed a lot of volume, and felt the best I ever had. I actually stopped in Waco for a day on my way back. I was going to go work at the Amazon warehouse for the winter. Stopped for a day on the way back and did several boulders I had never thought I was going to be able to do before. And then tried the main project, did all the moves in a few minutes, and I was I just have to come back and it's a done deal. But I had a start date at Amazon already, so drove back, and this was my first season working nights. So I was working 5 12-hour night shifts a week, and I didn't plan accordingly. I had no idea just how much that was going to tank me. I was it's fine. I just have to survive for a little over 2 months. This will be chill. And man, I got crushed. And the second I finished, I got sick, and then sort of started to get better. And then right as I was leaving for Waco, I got a sinus infection. Showed up to Waco with a sinus infection, couldn't hike up the chains. Anytime I'd try and climb on anything, was struggling to breathe.
Yep.
And man, I was just I was unmotivated. Like,
Yeah, for sure.
I had planned on being there for like 5 weeks, and the first 2 weeks I wasn't even really climbing, which is like, man, that's a terrible place to be and not be rock climbing.
Yeah, no doubt.
So I'd say like what I did prior was amazing. Like, it worked really well. I had all this momentum built up. I was really psyched, and had I not had to go back, like, I think I would have just achieved the goal then. And so, yeah, I'd say for me, it was great. Like, I'm a big fan of the idea of building momentum and almost like taking a touch longer than you think you need.
Yeah.
Like, had it not been, so here's what's tough though, is like, had my initial plan been, okay, I'm going to go out on this trip and climb a lot of volume, then I'm going to go straight to Waco to try this thing, I probably would have been too intimidated to say, oh, it's fine. I'm not even going to really try almost anything harder than V9, which is a couple grades lower than what I want to do, because I'd have been like, well, how can that make me strong enough? But instead I was like, oh, it's fine. I've got time. Like, I'm just going to put my head down. I'm going to do all the things that are really hard for me. I don't care about the grade.
Yep.
So by having a little bit of detachment, like, I think it was easy for me to build a momentum. But had I directly been leading into it, maybe I'd have jumped the gun a little bit. And I'd been like, no, got to start trying hard things now.
Yep. Digging into the process. Yeah. And I think you have to be, again, I'm going back to this, but I think you have to be honest about your own personality. There are definitely people who their sub goals to do a volume of things that are challenging, but at a lower grade. And they can really start to like doing that. And then that's all they do.
Totally.
And getting on the hard stuff becomes really intimidating. Even though they may have said, my goal is V10, once they start sending V8s really fast, that shit becomes addicting. And they love that dopamine hit of those quick V8s, and they just keep doing it over and over and over and over and over and never actually get to the V10. Never
totally.
try the project.
Man, I can't say, like, this is, this is one of those things that when I say to people, or I bring up, like, I get two reactions. One is that really a thing? Like, I don't think that's the thing that happens. And the other one is, oh, I know that.
That's me.
But It's, if you have a goal, you have to try the goal.
Yeah.
Like, Dan John's keep the goal kind of thing. Like, if your goal is to go out and climb 13A in a season, you have to try 13A that season. Like, like I said, probably most of the people are like, well, duh, like, no shit, you have to go try 13A.
Yep.
But there are a lot of people who, they're like, man, I really want to climb V10 this season. And you ask, like, okay, like, what are you doing? Like, did you try V10 this season? Like, I sort of tried one at the end of the day, but I was really wrecked. And I don't know, I had a bunch of friends and didn't want them to sit around. So I tried it for like 15 minutes and left. It's like, well, what did you expect was going to happen?
Right.
Like, if you want to do something, you have to give yourself the opportunity.
Yep. And I like, that's where I really like the idea of having a clear path, check the box and move on. Don't start adding more goals, in between. So check the box, keep it moving. And, the reason I brought up that other, this research, this study showing that sub goals can tank your main goal is because a lot of this is there's conflicting evidence, saying that this is the way. No, this is the way. And there's some serious argument about this. And I think you have to be, again, honest about your personality and which one fits you better and understand which one fits you better. And that might take a bunch of goal setting and failure at your goals, or goals that are too easy to achieve, or, it's going to take some mistakes, but that's all part of the learning process. And one of the big things that people argue about is putting your goals out there socially. Mm-hmm. Whether it's, some people say writing your goals down is too much, that you get the dopamine hits from just writing it down, just seeing it in front of you gives you this dopamine hit that will make you not actually work toward the goal. For me, that's not the case. And there's quite a bit of evidence saying that if you tell people about your goal, you won't take action towards your goal because you get those dopamine hits. Your brain processes it just as it does if you had already done it. Again, for me, that's not the case. If I put something out there into the world, that holds me accountable. And I really like that accountability. I feel like everybody out there in Instagram land is waiting for me to be working toward my goal. And that makes me work harder toward it. If you're not that person and you find that if you put goals, that you've put out 25 goals over the last year on Instagram and you haven't worked toward any of them, then maybe that's not the way to do it for you.
Yeah.
But I think you need to know, and you need to be honest and not just trust the research, because whatever the research is, whatever these studies say, they conflict. So it can't be both, for one single person.
Yeah, no, totally. Like, I mean, for me personally, I'm not a big fan of talking about goals out loud. Like, I'll talk about processes.
Sure.
Like, because to me, that's what I need to be focusing on anyways. Like, if your process is good, like, the goal will happen.
Yep.
But yeah, I don't know. Goal, like, even just talking about it right now, I'm not that psyched on it. Like, I like the idea of even like mentioning goals.
Yeah. See, I'll make a banner with my goal. I don't.
Yeah, not into it,
like
man.
Do you have reminders for yourself of your goals? Like, are there any ways you keep reminders?
I have a beer sitting somewhere in my life. It was in my van for like 2 years, rolling around. It was a Victory beer for Boulder. It was in there for like 2 years, and then I moved it to my parents' house. It's somewhere, like, I don't know, in the garage or something. I prefer to pretend it doesn't exist. It's a reminder of sorts.
Okay.
For a goal.
Yep.
I don't know. It's but yeah. So
but it doesn't work for you.
No. Yeah. No. It's funny because I got that for that one trip. I was like, oh, this is it. Like, this is my little this is my reminder. And then nope, just been sitting around.
So that was an incentive. Maybe that was more an incentive.
Yeah.
And that didn't work for you. So maybe you need to add a donut to your incentive.
Donuts.
But you're going to eat the donut anyway. So
exactly. I mean, and that's just it. It's like, if I want a donut, I'm just going to buy a donut. I don't need to wait to send anything to buy a donut.
Yeah, especially if you're in Waco, that's easy.
Oh God. Do I have reminders?
Well, for instance, I had a couple when I was working toward 514. Annalisa and I are really into mid-century furniture. And I had this mid-century Starburst clock that I loved, and also we had this mid-century stove that had a clock on it that was really cool. Neither clock worked, so I set both clocks to 5:14, just as a reminder when I walk through the living room. I look at my Starburst clock, or when I'm making dinner on the oven clock, it says 5:14 at all times. Now I can't change that to 514B because the clock doesn't have that capability, but I can move the hand a little bit. So
14 and a quarter.
So that was a great reminder for me. Like it's time for me to work on my goal. It's time for me to work toward this. And that time is pretty much all the time. It's there in front of me. So that was a great reminder. Some people like a photo of the route on their refrigerator, or whatever it is in their locker at the gym, or whatever. But I think reminders can be really important.
Yeah. No, I think for some people that's really great. Like, yeah, I don't know. I like checking back in, like watching videos every now and then of like whatever the route or boulder that I'm psyched on is.
You just watch videos anyway. That doesn't count.
Not always. They're not the way they used to.
Did you guys hear that in his voice? That not always, and actually it's always.
That defensive squeak. Yeah, I don't know. I'd say I don't really set reminders quite as much.
Okay. For me, I think another important thing, and we've kind of talked about this a little bit already, but I want to just put it out there implicitly, is that you have to turn some of these things into habits. And I like the idea of Dan John's shark habits. If you know that hangboarding is a clear step on the path to your goal, then have that hangboard where you're going to use it. Put it in a place where you're going to use it. Put it in a place that you can't pass it up. So I can't be clear enough in that on that timeline towards your goal, there need to be things that are habitual, that you can turn into these shark habits, these one bite and it's done habits.
Yeah. I mean, if nothing else, I mean, not only does it make it like you more likely to succeed, but man, like you don't want to make multiple choices every single day. That's hard.
Yep,
like
totally.
The last thing I want to do is be like, okay, am I going to go for a run this morning? It's like, instead, if I just have my tennis shoes like right next to my bed and like I sleep in my running shorts, I wake up and I just pop my shoes on, I go out the door. Like, there you go. Like, that is so much easier than being like, okay, I need to go like figure out what shorts I'm going to wear. Let me go find my shoes. Are they in my car? And they in the garage? I don't know. Like, just make it to where it's a habit and you don't even think about it.
Yep.
I think too, timing things during the day. We were talking about this earlier. Everyone's energy is kind of, the amount of energy you have during the day is completely different. Like some people can do, like they are very inspired at night, and that's great. So if you're if you're like, oh, like I can do all my like training at night and that'll be great, awesome, man. For me, like one of the best things I ever did was I started like I would exercise before I'd go to work.
Yep.
So like, cool, like I want to do core every day. Okay, like man, if I waited till the late afternoon or night, like I could find any excuse to not do it.
Yep. Hangboarding in the morning was huge for me because if I waited till after climbing, I would skip it.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is also that idea of kind of ignoring perfect. Like we talked about in the 5-minute fingers, like, how much benefit were you getting out of the morning hangboard? Was it 100% where maybe you were only getting like 70% of what you could have by doing it in the morning?
Yep.
But you were doing it.
Right.
So you like 70%.
It's quite a bit more than zero.
It's quite a bit more.
And I'm not good at math.
Yeah. I mean, that's, one of the best lessons I learned in school was like from a second grade teacher. And I think it was like, it wasn't entirely meant to be this, but she was just like, okay, she pulled up an Excel spreadsheet. She was like, let's say you have 10 homework assignments.
In second grade, you had Excel spreadsheets?
Whatever they were at the time.
Oh man, we only used abacuses
yes.
in second grade.
Abacus and drawing in the sand.
Yeah.
So she was like, okay, like let's say you get 6 100s and then you turn in 4 zeros. She's like, you just got a 60.
Right.
She's like, now let's say you get 4 100s and you turn in like 6 70s. It's like now you're actually like, you'd have a passing grade at that point.
That was a lot of crazy math that I can't do.
But yeah, so now it's like, I don't know, that'd be like an 80 or something or whatever. But she was just like, something is better than nothing.
Right.
And I think the whole idea she was trying to impart was like, you should like, do things. To me, I was just like, okay,
at least some of it.
Whenever I'm going to turn in homework, start just scribbling like crazy because I'm going to forget it until like 10 minutes before the class. Just put things down. Anything's better than nothing. If I get a 30, that's way better than 0.
Totally.
So I don't think that was what she was going for, but it's this so bringing this back to climbing, like it's this idea of ignoring perfect. So yeah, maybe I'm not perfectly warmed up in the morning to do core and it would be better if I did it right after climbing. But man, I just wasn't going to get it done consistently where this got it done.
Yeah.
The
degree of flexion in your elbow that's most important when you're doing isometric hangs doesn't matter if you're only doing half of the workouts. Mm-hmm. It's more important to do a few more workouts. So don't get into the weeds, and something's better than nothing for sure.
Yeah. Imperfect action's way better than perfect inaction.
Perfect action is better than
imperfect action.
Imperfect. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Do shit.
Yeah. Do shit.
Yeah.
Little and often over the long haul, to quote Dan John, since we're doing that. How about we take a break, and then when we come back, we can put each other on the spot a little bit.
I don't like this.
Tough break. Hey everybody, Chris here. Since it's a new year and it's our second birthday, we're going to try to start 2018 off on the right foot by reaching for our goals, and we'd love your help. We're about to lay out some of the things we hope to accomplish this year, and you can help us jumpstart it in 2 different ways. Number 1, sign up for the newsletter. We're still deliberating on the name. We hope to have it to you monthly in 2018. You can sign up right there in your show notes in your podcast app, or go to powercompanyclimbing.com, click on the banner up top. I'm personally not a big fan of tons of extraneous emails, so we aren't going to be filling up your inbox. Don't worry about that. Number 2, I've recently started recording short episodes detailing my own process as I work my way back to where I want to be. I'm putting those out on the We Scream Like Eagles podcast, the patron-only podcast, and I'll be delivering that bi-weekly to the patrons. If you're interested in supporting the podcast and checking out those episodes, following along, watching me fall off the wagon, whatever it is, I don't know what's going to happen yet, but if you're interested, patreon.com/powercompanypodcast, and you can get those episodes for as little as $1 a month, and that support goes a long way in keeping this podcast going. Thanks a ton, and back to the show. Okay, we have returned. Do you want to share some goals? You don't have to. I'm going to, because it's what I do. But how about life goal, work goal, climbing goal?
Whoa.
That's big, and I'm just throwing that at you because I know we hadn't discussed this at all. But I'll start. And life goal, I'm going to go ahead and say I'm going to keep that one to myself. Making that one
Great
private.
Start.
You reserve the right to do that as well.
Okay.
So if you want to keep those things to yourself, that's totally okay.
Mm-hmm. Oh, am I doing life goal now?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to do all 3. Life goal.
You can choose for all 3 to be private as well if you want to.
Yeah, this is going to be a great summation to our podcast. And we're not sharing a thing. Goodbye. What was it? Life goal? Would you say business goal? And then...
Yep. Life goal, business goal, climbing goal.
I'm going to do business first so I can think on life.
Okay.
Business. So my goal for this last year, and now that it's December, I'm super excited. My goal is to only coach and only work for Power Company.
Mm-hmm.
Because in 2016, I had 7 different forms of employment.
Wow.
Yeah, taxes were fun. But yeah, it's like, man, that's just what I've done for a long time. Is I've always just like bounced a lot of jobs around and kind of just done that. And so I was like, okay, like I want to go all in. I want to be a coach full time. Like, and it's now December 8th, and looks like I'm gonna make it.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean I did the same thing this year. This is my first year where coaching was my full-time gig.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool.
I'll go ahead and say another business goal because I've been slacking on this. We are going to have what is it, like monthly newsletter?
Hallelujah. I have that written down on my notebook.
I've been saying I was going to start a newsletter for 2017. So
yep.
I'll go ahead and say it now. I don't like it, but that's it. We'll start the newsletter. So that was my business goal this last year, and that's mine for the next year.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think I've got some really specific business goals as well. And I've got one that's a little more vague, but all of these will sort of build up to that bigger vague goal. I had newsletter written down here, so I'm glad you just took that one off my hands. And a couple of my goals that have been loose goals, and I'm going to make them a little more concrete right now, is that I want to get the ebooks updated, the ebook training plans. I want those to be updated. I want video links to all of the exercises. I want to add some of our movement drills in instead of just saying technique practice, because I think that's a cop-out that a lot of coaches use. Mm-hmm. Practice your technique. Well, what the fuck does that mean?
I mean,
so we're going to tell people what it means.
Skills only make up like 75% of your rock climbing.
Yeah, it's not that much.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to get those ebooks updated. I'm going to send out links to all the people who have already bought ebooks, that they get deep discounts on the updated versions. So yeah, that's a big one for me. I also want to get our first book out, and you and I have been working on co-authoring a book for quite a while, and I think that's going to come out in relatively early 2018. So those are a couple of my really specific goals. And then overall, I just want to work on getting better systems and structures in place for the business. I can't make that a specific goal because honestly, I really don't know what that means at this point. I know it's something I need to work on and something I need to learn about, and probably hire someone to do administrative work that takes up a lot of my time. But again, I don't really know what that means. So right now, that's a pretty vague goal. And I think we should check in from time to time on these business goals, because all the people listening are affected in some way by these. So we'll definitely be checking back, and I can hopefully narrow that goal down, the systems and structures, and streamline things a little bit. So those are my business goals.
Cool. Let's go ahead and move on to climbing goals, I guess.
You're just skipping over life.
I may take a pass. I'll keep thinking on it.
Okay. I took a pass, so you're totally welcome to. Climbing goals.
Yeah. So for me, my climbing goal is...
First off, where are you at right now? And then let's talk about the goal.
Currently, I'm in Knoxville.
Climbing wise, do you feel like you've been climbing really well? I mean, I'll just go ahead and put it out there. You've been crushing shit lately.
It's been interesting, and it's actually been really exciting for me. So I feel like I had an odd year. Life goal is going to be work training balance. Not even so much just balance, but just figuring out. I feel like this year I was trying to figure out like how to be on the road, how to balance things, and figure out when to do what. And so I'll just tie it into climbing. Now I feel like after this last season, I just climbed in the red, and I spent 4 or 5 days in the new this fall. And man, it was cool. Like, I'd say my preparation in some ways were really good, and in a lot of ways were terrible. Terrible simply being in that I had done other things in the past that I hadn't realized they had worked so well, and I just wasn't finding a good balance this year. But like on paper, I had my best season ever.
Right.
So that was really cool. Like, I was able to climb harder sport routes than I ever have in much harder styles. And it was kind of cool looking at it and being like, oh, like I have just this one tool of my toolkit that's like well honed right now, but all these other things are woefully terrible. And I kind of had this realization of like, I don't need to be a better boulderer. Like, this is all for me to be like, my motivation now is to start returning back to sport climbing.
Okay.
Like, I don't need to be a better boulderer than I've ever been. Like, I don't need to have better power endurance than I've ever had. I don't need better power. I don't need better strength. I don't need better endurance than I've ever had before. But what I need is to be able to get those all, man, if I can get those all to like
80, several of those attributes up at once.
Yeah, if I get several of them up to like 85, 90%, like I'll be in a really good place. And so for me, my goal for this next year is to start having more of that well-rounded approach and saying like, okay, like how can I build these all up? Because I've definitely gone, even though I've tried to be more well-rounded, it's just been difficult.
As it is.
Yeah. It's hard spinning all the plates at once, but or keeping them all spinning. But I feel like something kind of clicked in me this fall, and I was like, oh, like this is the next step finally became obvious for me. Okay. And so, yeah, I'm working on kind of building that process now of like, what am I going to do? And for me, my goal is sport climbing next year and trying to have all those attributes being well-rounded at the same time. Okay.
Is there a goal route that would require all of those attributes?
Wouldn't you like to know? Yes, there are goal routes. There are goal rock climbs. But yeah, we'll
okay.
You'll know whenever I have some sort of enigmatic statement on Instagram and a photo of me on it. And you can just assume that's me sending.
Yeah, and that will frustrate Rachel Avalone to no end.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, Rachel. Okay, my climbing goals are a little more concrete, though I think I can make those even more concrete. And right now I just don't know what that is because I'm still relatively new to lander climbing. And that's where I'll be for most of the year. But my goals are, I would like to climb 3 to 5 13 pluses, because I've basically not really sport climbed since I did Transworld and had my shoulder surgery. I've done a handful of 13As. I might have done a couple 13Bs. Oh, I definitely did.
Yeah.
A couple of hard bouldery Bs. But otherwise, I really haven't done much pushing in sport climbing. So being in lander, relatively new area, has always been my anti-style. I would like to do some 13C, 13D, 3 to 5 of those.
Nice.
And I have a few that I would really like to do. Atomic Stetson, Atomic Cow are definite goals. I've put some time into Stetson, and every single time I seem to get injured. I don't get injured on the route necessarily, but I go skateboarding and fuck myself up and can't climb anymore. So,
and I lose a partner for the summer.
Yeah. So every time I feel like I'm close, I keep doing something to tank that. So we'll try not to do that this time. And then there's a route called Gangbusters out at Wolf Point that I tried in the past, that I tried one time, one of the days that I was out there, and I think I could do that one. So those are definite 3 more concrete goals. And then I would like to climb V11. I don't even know what the V11s are around Lander.
Yeah, I don't know many at all.
So that goal is going to be a little bit tougher, and I haven't completely come up with the system of things. That may end up being a goal that I move to 2019 if I don't get much bouldering time in. I don't know. I need to talk to the Lander people, and this is something I'm going to do. I'm going to talk to BJ and Kyle and Charlie and Alex and these guys, and try to figure out when the bouldering season really is and what the likelihood of getting out to the boulders really is. And then I'm going to build my work schedule and training schedule around that. So I'm going to prioritize getting out to the boulders and trying V11. So those are my goals. And maybe the next time we check in, I'll have a more concrete V11. I'll tell you this is the one I want to do if I can find one. So we'll see.
Right on. I'll add one more thing to my climbing goals, and that's to spend more time climbing with people who are psyched and that I enjoy climbing with on the same project.
Yeah, that's a good one for sure.
Because I'd say that was a huge one for me this year. I got to climb a lot with a good buddy of mine, Eddie Avalone, and we're similar build but very different climbing styles, and dude's just really psyched. And man, I think we both had like a good season because of that.
Yeah.
And it's just for me, like the people I climb with make such a huge difference. I mean, not only in performance, but man, it's fun. It's nice being around people you enjoy being around.
Yeah, totally. And that's something that I would like to spend more time doing that I haven't done much of, is climbing with someone on the same project. It's not an immediate goal because I know it's tough for me to do that. When I climb with Annalisa, we're not working on the same things, and climb with BJ, we're not working on the same things. So it's been tough for me over the years to try something with someone. But I really do like that process. And again, I could sit here and say that's my goal, but I know it's not realistic for me right now. So yeah.
Maybe I'll have to come to Lander a little bit.
Yeah, you come to. Well, we don't work on the same shit either. We could some of the things.
Yeah.
So we can find something.
Yeah.
But again, that's not a big goal because that may not happen. Okay. Anything else you want to say? You taking a pass on the life goal?
I think I blended it into my climbing goal.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Find the balance.
Yeah, and I think spending more time with good people is another good life goal. So, yeah.
I can tell you my immediate life goal. Get moved into this damned house.
That's a good one.
We bought the house in, I think, September, and I haven't moved in yet. So that's my immediate life goal, and I think I'll accomplish that in 2017. So that won't be my 2018 goal.
All right, so I've got one last thing, and this is on goal selection, and that's just pick goals that make you better. to where even if you fail at this goal, like you're still succeeding.
Yeah, and make you psyched.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't pick a grudge goal.
God, yeah. But yeah, so I mean, if your goal is like, I want to climb, 10, 13 pluses, or like, use an example, like you want to climb 5, 13 pluses in this next year, like even if you only hit 4, I mean, that's still huge. That'll be the most you've done, and you'll be a better climber for it.
Yep, totally.
So yeah,
I think that's important. Make yourself better.
Yes, that's why we're here.
All right, and we are here, and you can find us elsewhere. You guys probably know where: the Instagrams, the Facebooks, Pinterests. I need to start looking at Pinterest and see what the hell Pinterest is, because I never know. That's not a business goal, though, so may not happen in 2018, people.
It's not a goal. It's not getting done.
It is also not a business goal to get on the Twitters, because we don't tweet. We scream like eagles.
This time, it's time to build. This time to build. This time to build.